Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this conference. Thank you, Elena, for the support for the organization and in preparing the this evening. Actually, I was going to say afternoon, but this evening session. I will have the honor to quickly introduce Dr. Le to the audience. For those of you who've already seen the description of his career, you will see the opportunity that we have to this evening to really learn from someone who's gone through the block and run the race himself. And it's a good coincidence that the title, it's about a culture of excellence, right? Because Dr. Le it personifies that himself, right? Coming from a Vietnamese background but moving to America and having gone through the full rounds of visiting the world, and now he's on a path of visiting the world as well, in Europe mainly, but then he will move. I mean, he will visit to Asia. We were talking about this early in the week. The idea is that the chance that we got today is it's not about learning some theoretical points about operational excellence or Lean Six Sigma. It's really to learn from a true practitioner. The fact that culture is about connection, I can really say from a personal experience that we were able to quickly connect into a friendship as soon as we got together and really got to know each other. So it really is a very good chance today. So Dr. Le, the floor is yours. I think the dynamics of today will be that we're going to go through a few questions just to allow Dr. Le to know the audience. Elena will help us with the HA slides, where you guys will be required to input some of your answers, and based on those results and the answers, then we'll take it into Dr. Le's presentation. So again, thank you very much, Dr. Le, for accompanying us today, and it's really an honor. So if we move on to the quiz first.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we have used this tool, this amazing tool before now. I know. I think everyone knows more or less the dynamics. If you have your home mobiles or whatever device you have, you want to scan the code. Sorry, I'm going to mute.
I got it.
Okay, so if you can scan the code to participate in this question. Have you copied? You have?
Yep, people are joining.
I'm going to do that. Sorry if we have any mistake, because we have preparing right 5 minutes before the meeting. So, but we think it's better to have in this way that. Okay, let's move. Are you ready? Okay. So the easy one, or not? We have 1 minute, so.
Basically, I'm interested in, any questions that you might have that would help me focus on the presentation more, to be able to answer all the questions that you may have. Okay, learn best practices. Certainly, I will share with you what we've done, what I've done in the past when I implement initiative like operational excellence. So certainly we'll share with you a roadmap, and it has been proven to work. So oftentimes what I found is that organization went through implementing it, and without knowing the various steps, how they go about proceeding to the implementation, they might be not as effective.
The next one.
Okay. Head a supply chain, program manager, delivery manager. So I would expect all of you to have some background in project management, right? And that is certainly is a framework on how you manage projects. But I think the kinds of things I'm talking about is going to help you, look at how you manage your projects and even improve on how you manage them. Because certainly the PMI spell out what are the things you need to do, but then how do you do those things will be a different story, right? You can actually use best practices, but then it's not just about best practices that you follow, but once you implement something, you want to go back and actually monitor that process and continue to improve on that over time. So here's where I'm interested in the challenges, because this is very, very, it's at the foundation, because if you really understand the challenges, then you can know where to focus your effort, right? So changing the culture of organization. Okay, and in fact, before I left Northrop Grumman, we roll out Agile, and I have to tell you, once the organization moved over to Agile, it seems like we did not leverage of what we built over time, like implementing things like Lean Six Sigma, because Agile, to a great extent, really relies on the Lean foundation. And without having people who actually are skilled in Lean and Six Sigma, I'm afraid that it's more about speed, but then when you lose quality, you're going to lose speed for sure. So you need to kind of look at things holistically, how you can leverage off all the different skill sets that you build over time. Culture change, general change, align top management and Agile team. Yep, alignment is certainly one of the things I'm going to talk a lot about. How to sustain improvement. Perfect. Ramp down with expected, ramp up, hybrid models. Okay. So this is
This is the first one.
okay. So have you, if you have been involved in a change management, like the implementation of Agile or Lean Six Sigma, operational excellence, what were some of those challenges? Rejection from top management. So you are going from the bottom up. I presume you're trying to implement something and you're not getting buy-in from top management for whatever reason.
I'm giving extra time because we need to write in English with the Spanish keyboard, and so it's not.
We didn't say, but if anybody feels more comfortable, and I apologize, Dr. Lex, we mentioned this before. If anybody feels more comfortable, put it in Spanish. I will make sure that I follow with Dr. Le into answering those correctly. So no worries.
1 minute extra.
Wow, Agile management in a waterfall environment. That's, it almost like Agile is kind of iterations that you go through, right? But then how do you fit that into a waterfall environment? I think there are practices in Agile, but the main point is really not about waiting. We don't want a customer to wait until like at the end to see the product, right? You want to kind of, demonstrate so that it will not be a big surprise at the end that, oh, that's the wrong thing I'm looking for. Buy-in across different cultures, lack of confidence. Okay. Okay. So a lot of people are either at level 1, a few are at level 5, expert. Okay. So many people are more on the lower level in terms of experience and skills in Lean Six Sigma. I mean, it's not, you will see that when I walk through what I call a Lean Six Sigma framework, oftentimes when organization roll out something out like Lean Six Sigma, people treat it more like a cookbook, when all I see is it's a framework. So how you maneuver and how you adapt that to work best for your organization is the thing that you should do, right? So I'm gonna talk about that.
This is the last one, right?
Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay. So, Roberto, make sure that I keep me honest on that. I am going to answer some of the key questions here as I step through the presentation. Okay.
Will do. My pleasure.
So you can get a chance to say gracias por esta aquí. I hope I'm not blowing up the Spanish here. I'm trying, nowadays with the Google Translator, it's a lot helpful for me now. When I spent the last almost 2 weeks now in Seville, I love it so much that I said, Roberto, I said, hey, I need somebody to adopt me now. I love the food, the architecture, the people. I'm living like a local here. So it's been very wonderful. All right. So I can share my presentation now. It doesn't seem like I have that option, Roberto. Have you stopped sharing?
1 second. I think I can definitely do that for you. 1 second. So if I go to see all participants.
Oh, wait, I think I have.
Yeah, you should have it now, huh?
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Can you see my?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. How about if
it's not on presentation? Oh, there you go. There you go. Now we can see it. Okay.
All right. So culture is a very interesting word. You can take a lot of time to kind of define what it is. And I think if you ask people what culture is, people will have a different answer. But the simplified definition that I've heard from Jack Welch when he was at the helm of GE, he said, well, culture is what people do when nobody's watching, right? It's what people do without any oversight at all. It's naturally your habit and how you do things. So I think oftentimes what organization went through is that, any kind of major initiative that comes about, people jump into it and implementing without thinking about the culture aspects of it, right? And things like Lean Six Sigma, what I'm going to go through is I'm going to talk to you about some of the challenges that I've seen. And I will share with you a model where we piloted at a small organization, and it has shown a significant improvement in terms of employees' engagement. And I'm going to define what are those factors that drive the culture of continuous improvement. Okay, so what are the factors? What are driving that, so that we know where are the knobs? What are the knobs to turn? Okay, and in the end, I will share with you a roadmap on how to actually create and sustain that that culture of excellence. And then we'll leave you with some key takeaways. Hopefully, I'll provide my contact information. I'll be glad to answer questions that you may have at the end, or even after I leave Spain here. Okay, so we talked to the business challenge already, but what I found is that everybody is focused on certain aspects of the work. If you're in supply chain, obviously you focus on, you know, how you go about managing your supply chain. Do you have the right contracts, the terms and agreement? If you're in HR, you obviously are focused on making sure that you find the right talents and you bring on board in a timely manner. And oftentimes you get locked into that silo. But when you take a step back, it really does not matter what function you're working in. You have to basically support these two things. And one is, how are you helping your business with meeting or exceeding customer expectation? And I'm talking about external customer expectation, right? How are you helping with that? Because if you cannot deliver on what they expected, then you can't grow as a business, right? If you cannot grow as a business, then eventually you can't sustain your business. So number one is, how are you helping, making sure that whatever products or services you have is aligned to support the customer expectation, right? Then once you have that, the second thing that you have to ask yourself is, how are you keeping it growing? So once you have the right products and the right services, obviously you have to continue to improve on that, because no one is going to stand still. And if you don't improve over time, someone will, and they will take over the market, right? So besides your products and services, you need to kind of figure out how you can actually deliver in the most efficient manner, in the most cost-effective manner. Because if you cannot be cost competitive, someone else will do it for you, right? So I said this to a lot of clients and a lot of companies I work with, and it has to do with making sure that doesn't matter what role you are, you have to figure out how to align your goal to these two things. How are you adding value to these two things, right? Again, when the example I was giving about HR, you know, you think about, if you don't have the right people, obviously you're not going to be position yourself to deliver on what the customer wants in the future, right? So all those are tied together. So these are the two business questions that you constantly have to be aligned to. And regardless of your roles and regardless of where you are in the hierarchy of the organization, this needs to be addressed and aligned to. Now, based on what what you provide as input, here are some of the questions that when I start working through actually trying to develop this roadmap here, I start taking a step back and think about all the different initiatives that I have helped implement, like Lean, Six Sigma, Agile, CMMI, and the question is, were they successful? And I'd say to a certain extent, you know, we were able to make some quick gains, but when the question is being asked, have we been able to really create a real change in the organization DNA? You know, have we been able to change the culture? Have we been able to shift the mindset of how we do things? I would say no. There are some pockets of excellence, and in fact, you know, at large company, what I've seen is that a lot of these changes are kind of isolated to small pockets within the organization, right? And it doesn't permeate it throughout the organization. And so it's hard to really shift the culture when you only engage a small pocket of your organization. Numbers I've heard, like 5 to 10% of the organization are actually engaged in continuous improvement. When truly, regardless of your role, each of your role should be to work in your area of responsibility, but look for ways to continually to improve on how you do things, right? That's how you stay competitive in the marketplace, because things are shifting and changing so much. And when I look at the kind of gain that people have been able to achieve, There was some gain, but it's not very significant. And truly, many organizations have not been able to create that culture shift. And so that's why I'm here to kind of share with you what one can do and what are the factors that one should consider in terms of, shifting the culture. Okay. And it has a lot to do with how you do things. So I'm going to start talking about what are the factors that's driving this continuous improvement culture that you want to help create and then build and sustain over time. So first of all, in terms of the thing that we have to think about, a lot of us are technologists or process oriented. We think of systems, we think of process, but just go back and think about how much time do you think you spend on a day-by-day basis managing tasks versus managing people? If you are a people manager and you're a supervisor, obviously you have to manage people, but I would venture to guess that you spend a lot of time tracking tasks. How are we doing on those tasks? And you lose sight of the people behind it. We keep saying that people are our best asset, but when we spend the time, we tend to manage more of are we hitting the deadlines? Are we making the profit? Profit goals? Is the revenue on schedule, right? And so all those things are good to know, but in the end, who's really delivering on all those things? It's your people. And so the way I define a human-centered organization is, and this is tied to the culture of excellence here, is that it's an organization that seeks to deliver the most value. So you see, you got to focus on what's the right thing to do for the customer, because without the customer, it doesn't matter what you do, right? So you got to do the right thing for the customer, deliver the most value, while unlocking hidden potential and leverage talents that you have of every single employee. Because you know what, in the future, things are going to change even much faster with all the technology trends that's coming on board. And you have to be able to, not only tackle the products and service delivery but you got to make sure that you have good processes, you have good systems, and you have good, solid talents to help you deliver on those things. If you are familiar with the balanced scorecard approach, remember in the balanced scorecard, there are 4 dimensions. Number 1 is about the customer. Number 2 is about the financial aspects, right? So yes, you can deliver on what the customer needs, but it's got to be profitable, because otherwise you can't thrive as a business, right? So customer financial aspects, those are what I call more like a lagging indicator, right? It's the end result of what you do. The other two dimensions has to do with internal processes. Do you have good processes that will help you deliver on those products and services the most efficient way? And the 4th dimension is about organizational learning. Do you actually help develop people, making sure that they have the right skill set to position the organization for the future? So there are lagging indicators, but they're leading indicators. So what it says is that you can cut costs all you want, but if you don't invest upfront, making sure that you have the right skill set for the organization, you grow them over time, you make sure that you retain all your best talents, then you're going to lose out, right? Because you cannot deliver on profits, you cannot deliver on any promised products or services until you have good, solid skill set in the organization, and you have good processes as well. So in terms of the human-centered organization, you're putting the human at the center here. And I'm going to share with you something that I've learned about 15 years ago, when, I don't know if your organization went through like a Gallup survey, where you're trying to learn more about how do you engage your staff. And this has to do with the study that this is a pretty old study from Deloitte, but this is exactly what we've been talking about. People are our best asset. If you look here, what this says is that when you're able to actually create an environment where you can increase 10% of your employee commitment, right? You engage them sufficiently and we're able to increase 10% of your employee commitment. That drives 7% increase in customer loyalty, because you make them happy, they have great morale, they have good skill set, good tools to use, and they're going to be they're able to deliver and delight the customer, right? So that increase that drives 7% increase in customer loyalty, and that helps drive 5% in profitability. Okay, so most of the times what Wall Street force us to do is they get us to focus on the short term, right? Delivery on your revenue, your profit, your shareholder value. Those who are very strong leaders, who actually are visionary, and they really believe on a balancing act of making sure that they are not only delivering on short-term commitment, but they want to make sure that they position the organization appropriately for the long-term gain, right? So you can see that the genius here is, in the end, you don't just do one aspect of deliver on the one side of the equation. You want to be able to actually do both well. That's the only way to thrive as a business. Okay, so one case study I want to share with you is that based on this understanding, I went to and actually developed a curriculum and I implement at a small healthcare organization. I don't focus on any business metrics at all. I focus purely on customer and on employee engagement. And I don't want you to get lost in the numbers here, but I want to really, the key takeaway for you here is that, when you engage people, and all I talked about when I go in there, what you teach people is the aspects of how do you know whether you align an organization or not? Do you understand your goal? Do you understand your processes and procedures, how you perform your work? Are they aligned as a team, right? That alone, after like 4 months of discussion, and of course with the leadership support and the engagement for the director of the organization, we were able to actually move the Gallup survey engagement score from the 40th percentile to 89th percentile within a year. The staff are much more happier. There are lower number of sick calls, and there are a lot more engagement there. So by engaging people, it drove suddenly all these business metrics start to improve. And so that just illustrates the key point about, yes, you need to do well at managing all the work activities. It's very, very important, but you also have to pay attention to those, what I call leading indicators, where you know that you have the right staff to work with, you develop them, you grow them, you make sure you nurture them, you have an environment where there's good mentoring going on so that they can grow as an employee, and so you can retain the best talents out there, right? So I just want to kind of share this with you, because this is what this is the key takeaway for me when I start to develop this roadmap and how I go about doing that. Because what you will find is that when organization jump into actually implementing things like Agile or Lean or Six Sigma, you kind of jump in right in the middle and not really thinking about, do you have a stable environment, right? Do you have do people, are they aligned? And the analogy that I give a lot here is, do you remember how those birds fly in a V formation? The reason why there's a lot of studies here that demonstrate that when they fly in that V formation, it takes a lot less work, and they actually leverage up each other's and the bird that flies behind the leader, you know, are actually catching all the draft, just like the marathon runner. You know, they like to run closer to the leader because you want to kind of do less work, so you catch all that draft, and it's less work for you. And so in that formation, when people are aligned to support a common goal, it takes a lot less work, and they can move through a lot faster. So efficiency, you can actually gain a lot of efficiency by making sure that you have alignment of everyone within an organization, right? There's less friction. The challenge is that when the birds, when they fly out of formation, they actually feel that draft. They work so hard, so they need to get back into formation. But for us as human being in an organization, sometimes when you're out of alignment, you don't know whether you are or not, unless you get that feedback from your manager. And so this is where I say, you know, between the relationship between a manager and a staff, is that there ought to be more feedback than just, you know, once or twice a year performance evaluation, where you want a regular check-in, like on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, so that you can actually check to see whether the employee is still on board. Are they working on the same goal? That helps them with their prioritization, right? So that they know exactly where to focus on, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, this is also a very important point to make here, is that we tend to focus a lot at the leadership development and management development. And when you look at the numbers, there are only a few people at the top, and all of us, the masses, are in the front line. And when you talk about culture is defined at the frontline staff, right? Culture can be influenced from the top, but it is defined in the front line. And so if you don't actually engage this large group of people and making sure that they understand their goals, their roles within the organization, and understand how to actually execute and participate in continuous improvement, you're going to lose out. Just imagine how a few people at the top are trying to lead an organization when the masses don't align with the top people. I mean, there's a lot of weight to carry, right? So with that realization, the thing to if you want.
Sorry, yeah, Doctor, I think you've gone on mute. There you go, you're back.
Okay, yep. I'm back. Just now, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So so the model here is about making sure that, you know, the challenge is that the staff cannot leave for like 3 days out of the week to go and attend training. So normally the kind of training that I have experienced is what I call high touch, low frequency, meaning that high touch meaning that you spend a lot of time together and you train only like once a year, twice a year, or after you've done you know with that training, that's it, right? We want to kind of shift that to a model where I call low touch, high frequency. Low touch meaning that we spend only an hour a week, but we do it regularly enough so that eventually whatever people learn, I get a chance to reinforce some of those concepts. And as you reinforce them, eventually they will retain those knowledge, and it could be done as part of their habit, their natural way of how they do things. You want to really change the behavior of people. That's how it should be done, right? So moving from high touch, low frequency to low touch, high frequency. Okay, that's the ideal model, because then we're not asking for a lot of time away from the actual work and getting people to actually engage in the training, and then you provide the right kind of mentorship so that, you know, all that concepts and knowledge gets to be applied and practiced in their everyday work. Okay. Now, I want to kind of share briefly here and capture in terms of changing behavior. It's all about making sure that you know what kind of behaviors you want to have instilled in an organization. What are some of the expectations? And a lot of times we stop short of kind of help change that behavior, right? So the training is good, but until you put it into practice, there's really no value. Oftentimes people get certified. Oh, it's great, you certify, but are you applying those things that you've learned or from the certification? What have you been able to put into practice, right? And I use this all the time. I said, because people say it's best practice. I said, it's not about best practices. It's about what you practice that matters, right? So yes, best practice is great, but if it sits on someone's shelves and nothing is being implemented from a best practice perspective, then you're not getting value. So projects are good, but you got to see the result, right? You can actually spin up a lot of projects, and I've seen a lot of companies actually spin up a lot of projects that they don't complete at the end, and so they can't really extract value out of those projects. Now, to this presentation here, I would say you have to go beyond just doing projects, because you tell people to go to a full life cycle project, like a Lean Six Sigma project. That may not be the right thing to do, because sometimes a decision can change the entire outcomes, right? If you're looking at, and then you say, oh, we need to solve this problem right now. If someone at that meeting, all they have to do is turn around and say, how do you know you have a problem? Do you have data to actually prove or validate that you truly have a problem? And I've seen so many cases where we launch into something, we think there's a problem there, and then after you gather the data, the problem is not there, right? So instead of stopping the project, you carry it through, and there's little value gained at the end. Okay, so it's important to making sure that you execute, but sometimes it's not about going through and actually execute the entire life cycle project, but there are habits and behaviors that you can learn. That in a moment here, I'm going to unbundle all those things that you learn in Lean Six Sigma and actually help create a roadmap that when you learn those tools and techniques, and it helps you change the mindset of how you look at things, you will see night and day in terms of the kind of improvement that you see, instead of just focusing on those full life cycle process improvement projects. Okay, a little bit more about habits. So I want to say, a lot of times when we say you need to make decisions based on facts, right? That's an important thing to do, rather than saying that I need to know what I need to know. Now, saying that as a bad habit, sometimes it may make sense, right? Just like if you're bleeding, I'm not going to ask how much blood are you losing right now. I'm going to stop the bleeding. I'm going to put a patch right there. So sometimes it makes sense to do that, but you don't just jump in and try to patch things up if it's not something that you really could really cause damage. So I often say, well, put a the Band-Aid on, but you can always circle back and making sure that you develop the solution that could be sustained, and you can actually solve it once and the problem will not recur again, right? So pay close attention to the customers, but you know what? Sometimes you might feel like you have enough insight about the customer that you can move on, right? You don't spend a lot of times and trying to analyze it to depth. And in fact, there's limitation. You have to understand the limitation on getting the voice of the customer, understand what the customer needs are. Because remember, Steve Jobs, one time he said, well, if all you do is asking the customer what they want, by the time you deliver what they want, the customer wants something else. So, you know, it's almost like you have to be inside the customer organization. You understand more about their problems than they do themselves. So when you actually bring a problem to them, it's an aha moment for even for the customer. That's where you want to position yourself. Okay, take time to do the right thing. Yes, but sometimes, you know, it certainly is a bad habit to just get things done and we'll clean it up later. But you know what? Sometimes when it's so key that you have to deliver, as long as the risk is tolerable, right? You can accept the level of risk. You might launch it. And I have to say, probably Microsoft does this a lot, right? They just you know, roll out their beta products, right? Let the users come back and tell them here are what's wrong with it, and they continue to fix that. I'm not saying that that's how you should do it, but I'm saying that sometimes it may make business sense to do that. But obviously, take the right time to do it right. Because you know what? If you don't have time to do it now, you probably won't have time to do it later. You think you have time to fix it later, you won't. Okay? Collaborate, coordinate. Sometimes it may make sense to collaborate and coordinate, and sometimes you have to work cross-functional processes. Sometimes maybe the problem is contained within your area. You know, you focus on that. Okay? Avoid complacency, and the system is timeless, right? So, and this is where there's a balancing act that you have to really kind of discuss here, because having a system is important, meaning that you have to create a stable environment first. Actually, if you keep shifting, you know, people will not know how they're going to be able to work in an environment where goals are constantly changing. There's got to be some stability that goes along with that. So what I'm sharing here is that this is where it's very challenging in terms of what is the right balance. And I cannot give you the right or wrong answer. Sometimes there's not a right answer per se, but you gotta really be able to understand enough and question and probe enough so that you know what the right things are to do. Coming from the Eastern philosophy, you know, I love the kind of the yin and the yang here. To me, when I was I came to the US, I'm kind of a biculture in a way. I was raised in Vietnam and I learned the Western culture. And you know, the interesting thing for me is that it's never black or white. I never feel like it's not either, you know, one side or the other. I almost feel like within the black, there's a white, within the white, there's a black. And as a leader, you have to figure out what the right things are. And so when I say, you know, use facts and data, we're not telling you to disregard intuition. In fact, there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote a book called Blink. And in that book, he did a study on a competition between a general and a team of military analysts who has built lots of models on war gaming to try to figure out what the right strategy is. So you put a general against a team of analysts with lots of fast computing models and so on. Guess who wins at the end? The general, right? Now, why is that? Because the general has been so experienced. He built so much insight and intuition over the years. And he looked at the situation, he's able to pinpoint exactly, and he make very quick decisions. He was able to do that effectively. And in a battle, you know, that's what you need. You need someone who actually can look at being a situation awareness and be able to make precise decisions. So what I'm saying here is sometimes you use you might have intuition, use that, but you know, use some facts and data to validate your intuition as well. So you got to kind of do both, right? We're not saying that one side is better than the other. Customer focus is good, but if all you do is focus on the customer and you don't have good processes to deliver, you're not gonna sustain as a business, right? Effectiveness is about doing the right things, and the way I define efficiency is about doing things right. So until you know what the right things are to do, it doesn't matter how efficient you are. You got to make sure that I'm doing the right thing first, then I make sure I deliver those things in the most efficient manner. So effectiveness has to come together with efficiency. Sometimes it helps to work cross-functional, but sometimes within your own operation, you have so much issues that you want to focus on that before you actually open it wide, because working cross-functional is always more difficult, more challenging, right? Planning is important, but if you don't act on your plan, then it's just a plan. But acting without a plan is a plan for failure, right? So you got to do both. In change and stability, I already mentioned. So the art in leadership here is a balancing act. So you often find that the pendulum within an enterprise or organization, sometimes they move left, move right. Let's focus on data. Let's do data analytics. I'm going to hire a lot of data analytics expert, and let's just focus on data. And then we lose sight of the other things. So the point here is that, you got to be able to leverage, and you got to be able to know what the right things are to do. It's really a balancing act. Okay. Okay. So how much time I have, Roberto? Let me see.
I think we're doing quite well. We have about 40 minutes to go.
Okay, very good. So if you are, I think most of you, you have a few experts in this group here. You have the majority of people within level 1 to level 3 here in understanding what Lean Six Sigma is. And let me just put it to you. To me, it's very simple. All right. If you understand any work consists of processes, and the F function here is the process, right? It's nothing more than a transformation from the sets of inputs. That includes people, material, everything else, right? Systems and so on. Transform that into something that the customer care about. It could be an internal customer or an external customer. So if you look at Six Sigma, it's nothing more than a structured problem-solving framework. And it goes to the DMAIC life cycle, meaning define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And you can call these phases differently, but it all is trying to achieve the same thing, okay? Basically, in the define phase, you have to know the why, right? What outcomes here are you looking to impact? That's the define phase. You want to understand from the customer perspective, what do they look for? That's the purpose of the goal of the define phase, discovering the why, okay? The why as y equal f of x. Then before I launch into solving it, I want to measure, because I want to have a baseline to see where am I? How good am I working? How good is it how good is it performing right now? So I have a baseline. So if you work on the HR problem, it's about the cycle time from posting a requisition to getting someone in the door, right? So that's the measure that I want to impact, okay? So discovering the why, because you know what, if it's the problem, if you are so far ahead of your competition, maybe you don't want to devote your resource there, right? So I want to measure, I want to have some data based on, so I can make some decisions. Now, so it forces you to actually go to the measure phase. Now, before, you know how we normally solve problem? We saw the problem, we see a problem, and we say, okay, here's a solution, right? That's normally how we solve problem, solution. But you don't even know what the root causes are. You don't even know whether you actually truly have a problem or not. So Six Sigma kind of force you to actually step through and baseline on your measure. And then the analyze phase is about discovering, the factor X, you don't have unlimited resources, so that you can actually, if you were to impact a vital few, that you can get the maximum impact on the outcome that you're looking for. So a measure is about baselining it, understand the process that's being that is responsible for delivering on the outcomes. And the analyze phase is about understanding what are the axes that you need to really focus on that will give you the biggest bang for your buck, right? The biggest bang on your outcome. And then, before I jump into the first solution that comes to mind, I have a team of experts, a team of very talented individuals, and I'm not leveraging off their creativity. So I want to open up the floodgate. Once I understand the root cause, I want to open up and say, what are all the possibilities? What are all the potential solutions before I even select one, right? So you can see that by getting people to be involved and engaged in this process, you now open up to a whole slew of creative individuals who might be able to solve problem in a very unique way. You never know, right? And so that's what the improve stage is. It opened up the floodgate. I get all the brainstorming, all the great ideas, and then I down select it to one or two that I would consider based on certain criteria. Could be cost of implementation, could be in terms of how much saving I could achieve with that solution, and then so on and so forth, right? And then control is about making sure that once I put that solution in place, I want to make sure that the owner of the process is going to own it. He or she is going to monitor it, and they're going to control the process going forward. So it does not revert back to how things get done. Okay, so I just explained to you that whole framework on how best to solve a problem. And you can see why it's designed as define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. It forced the rigor of making sure that you understand the problem and you understand the root cause, and you use innovative ideas to solve your problem, and then you control that going forward. So that's the whole framework of what Lean Six Sigma is all about, right? So with that, I want to share with you why I think one of the things I often find why Lean and Six Sigma or even Agile nowadays are constrained within a very small pocket of the organization. I mean, it is truly pretty complex when you step to define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. It takes a lot of time and resource for a team to go through and understand the problem, gather data, analyze it, and then come up. I mean, it takes time and effort. So you want to devote those effort to very complex and impactful problem. You don't want to use that whole life cycle process improvement framework on something simple and it doesn't get a lot of value, right? On an average, if you put like 5 people on a team, and let's say an hour a week, that adds up to a lot of time and resource. So you want to focus those things on very meaty problem. So what I'm sharing here is that in the define phase, it is about understanding voice of the customer, internal or external. It's about making sure that you diagnose, you are solving the right problem, right? And so, the next time when you sit at the meeting, I mean, someone could be throwing out a problem. Like I said, if someone would just stop and before you actually launch into a process improvement, you actually do diligence, making sure that you're picking out the right problem to solve. That alone adds a lot of value, right? Doesn't have to, you don't have to go through the entire cycle. And the measure phase is about targeting the relevant facts and data. I have often came across when I was reviewing a lot of projects, I've seen all kind of graphs and data that we collect, and it doesn't help answer the question about the problem. It doesn't give someone more insight into the problem itself so that you understand more about, what's the causes of the problem. So this is really about targeting the relevant facts. So you understand more about the situation, right? Now, if you are managing a project or a program, clearly there are heartbeat measures that you may want to really, strip out all the extraneous information. There might be a few heartbeat measures that's very important to you. And what I call those things are sometimes, you know, again, put it in the context of y equal f of x. Those are the y factors. But now you want to also understand what's driving that y. If you understand that, and if you can actually gather data on, you know, what's driving those y, you can then isolate what are the x's, the few x's that if you are to just turn the knob and it gives you the biggest impact on the outcome that you're looking for, right? So this is all about targeting the relevant facts. And it helps to have somebody in an organization on the team to be kind of data driven and data savvy, be able to analyze statistically and use data analysis to help pinpoint where the problems or where, what the root causes are. And analyze is about, you know, targeting, understand the root cause behind it. If you don't understand the root cause and all you do is fixing symptoms, then you're not really solving your problem, right? You may think you solve it, and then it revert back, it recurs again. And then improve about targeting the right facts. You can use the tools and the technique that we teach in improved phases in many different ways. You hear about innovation, and I think that is where if you can facilitate a team and going through the process of identify new products or services or new ways to do things, different ways to do things, that certainly is how you actually can actually grow as a business. Because what you would like to do from a position perspective is not only do you innovate, but you find different ways of delivering those products and services so that you can actually be very profitable, and you actually can invest those profit into other things within the organization, and that's how you can grow. The analogy that I give here is that you probably, I don't know if you know about the company called Blockbuster. They rent movies, DVDs, and I'll bet you in the early days of Blockbuster, you go into the store, you look for the movies that you want, right? And then you go on a check line and check out, and you pay and you take the movies home, you put on your DVD machine and you watch the movies, right? So as a business, all I do is if I can improve on making sure that I have the right inventory, the process, the checkout process is smooth. I can get people to check in, check out very quickly. If all I do is I try to operationalize and try to improve the operations, that's all I can do. But you know, the moment when you pose a question and say, is the product here the DVD that they're renting, the movie, or is it more about content delivery, right? Netflix came in and posed a different question. You know, how am I going to deliver the content to the customer? And when, you know, the internet opens up, they can do streaming. That's how Netflix were able to kind of put Blockbuster to basically just, they just went bankrupt, right? And so you see there's a lot of innovation that we're teaching in the improved stage, ways to brainstorm. That's what you use it for. So you don't have to solve a problem. Sometimes it's about coming up with new products or services, or how to deliver something differently, okay? And then sustainment is about making sure that how you keep it sustainable, how you keep it the long run, how can you strive it and continuously improve on it. So what I'm sharing here are a bunch of tools and techniques that if we were to unbundle each of these tools and techniques here, you can just take it away and apply it on your everyday basis, right? You don't have to go to the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And like I said, save those for more of the much more complex project that has bigger impact on the organization overall. So here's what the philosophy of when we design this. We think about making sure whatever we do that we create a foundation that would enable a culture change. So focus on staff alignment and focus on teamwork. The other thing that I also recognize is that something I learned quite a few years back from a book called Change or Die. sounds pretty unusual for a title. Either you change or you're going to die, right? So in that book by Alan Deutschman, he talks about a study where people who went to triple bypass surgery, you know, and at the end of the successful bypass surgery, the head physician turned to the patient and said, you need to change your lifestyle or you're going to die, right? Now, guess what? After 3 months to 6 months, after all that coaching, the patient revert back to their old lifestyle, knowing that they're going to die. Okay. Almost 80% of those patients who went through a successful bypass surgery revert back to their old lifestyle, knowing they're going to die. Okay. I'm going to make the story short here, but what they learned is that when you use the 3 F's, meaning the facts, you give them all the facts you want, explaining the, you know, why it's not going to be good for you. Use all the facts, you play up the fear factor. And sometimes if you can, you force people, if you can. Facts, fear, force do not change behaviors. What change behaviors are the 3 R's. So the 3 R's are relate, repeat, and reframe. So until you actually can communicate to the patient in a way where they can relate to how does it impact them, and you have a team of people who share a similar story, how they were able to survive through that bypass surgery, and you can repeat them and reinforce them in a way so that they learn over time. And then once you are able to reframe how they see things, they have to see things differently. Until that's done, they're not going to change their behaviors. So relate, repeat, and reframe. I would challenge you to look at all your training that are being delivered right now. If you put it to the test, you probably are using a lot of facts. You tell people what it is, what it's good for, blah, 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 right? Are you able, you know, maybe if you don't do it, we could lose your job, blah, 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 and play up the fear. And if you can, you put them under, you know, performance plan, whatever may be the case. You know, I'm not sure that it would even change their lifestyle. If it does change their behaviors, it would change probably within a short amount of time. It probably changed for a few months, maybe a year. And then once you don't put on that forcing function again, people will revert back to their old habits and how they do things in the past. So training has to be delivered in a way where you can communicate and you can relate to. This is why in the training that I have worked on and developed, there are interesting story, and it's very simple. So for people to understand. For example, I use a lot of the Stephen Covey, you know, if you're familiar with the 7 habits of highly effective people, in there, he talks about, you know, there's the 7 habit about sharpening the saw, the story about the woodcutters. You know, my 8-year-old son, one time I was giving a lecture and I was doing, you know, babysitting. He was 8 years old. I explained about, you know, why the two woodcutter here, one are cutting, keep working day and night, you know, keeping working, no breaks at all. The other guy, you know, every 10 minutes, he's taking a break. Well, it turns out that the guy who takes the most break, we're able to finish the job a lot quicker. And it turns out, you know, that every time he takes a break, he sharpened his saw, right? In fact, that's what you're doing here. You are sharpening your saw. And what I'm suggesting here is that there ought to be analogies and storytelling as part of the training so that people can, it's easy for them to remember. You know that you may not take everything that I said today. Maybe there's 1 or 2 things that you can take that could be very beneficial, right? You don't have to take away a lot here. There's only a few points. If you can just focus on that and change that, how you look at things, how you do things, it could add a lot of value to your organization. Focus on sustained incremental progress, avoid information overload. this is my point about, remember the low touch, high frequency, deliver in small chunk, give them a few things to learn, a concepts, 1 or 2, and then reinforce it the next time you do it. You keep doing that enough times, it well bound to be, it's part of their habits. Okay. When you go what I call the water hose approach, where you give a lot of information at 3 days or a week of training, I'm not sure how much they'll be able to retain. And at the end, those leader or the manager, are they going to be able to come back to their work environment and apply those things or not? It's very questionable. Okay. Institute a mechanism to reinforce some of the concept. When I design it like over 12 months or 12 weeks, every time you can reinforce the old concept before you move on to the next one. So have a mechanism, and then you want a mentor to be able to kind of work with the team, keep review and having regular meetings and talk about those things. That's how you actually change people's behavior. And I just talked about unbundle the score, Lean Six Sigma concept, and relate to what people do and see every day. Okay, so that's how we kind of design the training. And what you notice here is that before I even talk about Lean and Six Sigma, this is the voice of the customer here, linking actions to outcome. Before talking about that, I first talk about alignment. Because without alignment, truly you have a very unstable system, a very stable organization. And you know that you cannot improve an unstable system. The first thing you need to do is stabilize your system. Okay, so alignment helps you stabilize your organizational system first. Because think about this analogy I give out a lot is that you look at the people who are actually competing on a rowboat. They row, right? You can have the best athletes. You can have the best boat design that cuts through the water. You can have the best paddle, the best techniques. And if they don't sync up and they don't roll together, they're going to go in circle, right? They're not going to be able to win any races at all. So the first thing you need to do is get them to roll together. That's the whole point about alignment, right? Making sure that everybody's aligned. They know their roles. They hold their goal. They know their procedures and processes in place and how they interact and work well together as a team. I have run across many organizations or teams that are just not well aligned, and you can give them the best tools, the best processes, nothing will matter, right? And I like to say that if you have level 1 people and you have level 5 processes, they're not going to use it. You have level 5 people, you have level 1 process, they will try to improve the process. Okay, so that goes on to my next point about first who, then what. You find the right people on the team, and they will figure out what the right strategy are, and they will figure out what the right things are to do to help take the organization to the next level. Okay, so teamwork and alignment are very critical, and that goes first. And if they don't know, you want them to be empowered to ask, what's their goal? What's my role? So that there's none of that, issue with conflicting roles and responsibilities. Self-assess, you gotta have a way to kind of assess. And this is where I think oftentimes we are so busy. We are so overwhelmed with activities. And so we just put our heads down and you focus on executing on the task at hand. And you don't have the time to actually take a step back and look, how am I doing? Am I aligning well? Am I prioritizing my task appropriately based on the organizational goals, right? So that kind of give you a way to kind of help assess to see what are your priorities. And then to be able to prioritize, put first things first. If you think about the Stephen Covey 7 habits, it's very well aligned to what I'm discussing here. you know, put first things first. You got to know where your priorities are, because if you don't, then you're not gonna be as effective, or you focus on things that doesn't matter. And you know, if you complain about why you're not being rewarded, well, you know, you're not helping the organization, because you're not seeing where the organization is going, and you want to really help, you know, think through and prioritize your tasks appropriately. Start with the end in mind is really about understanding the end game here, right? From your customer perspective. But you can apply this in many different ways. How often do you sit in a meeting and you don't know what the end game of the meeting is? You don't know what you want to get out of the meeting. And if that's not clear up front, then help the team leader ask questions. What are we here for? What are we trying to achieve? I've seen so many meetings where people go through, and at the end, there's just, you know, lots of action going out, and at the end, you don't know who's owning what piece of the action. So that alone, starting with the end in mind. I always start with the end in mind, making sure that if that's what the end is, and I want to make sure I design my processes appropriately so I can achieve that end. Okay, so there's a lot of things that could be learned from there, and you can apply on your everyday activities. Linking actions to outcome. Again, question about what actions are you taking and how well does it support the end in mind, right? Those outcomes that you're looking to achieve.
Sorry, Dr. Sorry,
yes.
Just the 15-minute hit warning, okay? Just we have 15 minutes.
Yes, very good. Great, thank you. And then think lean. And then that's where Lean Six Sigma is about. Think lean, understand data, right? You get now after you understand all the ways, you remove all the ways, then it's about understanding your data. And then variations is another concept that's very powerful. Once you get to the high level performing organization, that's where you really want to reduce variations, because that's what defines what quality is, right? Just think about your customer. If one time you deliver 10 days ahead, the other time you deliver 10 days delay, they're not gonna like that. They want consistency, right? And in fact, I would rather someone deliver product to me 10 days exactly all the time. At least I can plan for it, right? And then holistic is just something new, and I think about mindfulness. Has a lot to do with the fact now that we are overwhelmed with a lot of information and data. You don't know what's the truth anymore. So you want to be mindful in how you do things. And that's speak to a holistic approach. And then sustainment is, you know, all the challenges that I'm talking about, and how do you go about sustaining that going forward. So the training is like 12 different modules here. You know, once a week, or it could be once a month, depending on, you know, once every 2 weeks, it can be designed appropriately, but that's the roadmap. If you actually go through this and without the first 4 steps, you're going to miss a lot. Okay. Here's where you can see the kind of result, that the kind of behaviors I'm looking for. If people start out, don't understand excess inventory is a waste, now they do. That's a very, very important factor, that the next time they know that they want to manage to be very lean with little waste. Place more focus on customer, right? Help group sessions to define goals and role clarity. If it's not clear to them, they will start to do that, because if they don't do that, guess what happened? The teams are going to flounder. They're going to focus on the wrong goals. The priority change. There are no clear roles. People are going to step over each other. So, you know, and then who's at the receiver end of the product I work on? That's very important, because oftentimes, you know, I have my internal customer. So I want to make sure that I deliver those things, and I want to make sure I deliver exactly what the people downstream needs, because otherwise they're going to come back to me and say, I need this information instead. You're not giving me the right stuff. They can't do their job until I do my job correctly, right? So a lot of times there are a lot of cross-functional issues. So you can see here, there are a lot of habits or ways to do things differently that are considered as behaviors. It's not a process improvement problem that they just solve. Those are the kinds of habits that they can actually, they can see things differently, and now they start to do things differently. In fact, people who went through this kind of training, they start to want to learn more about Lean Six Sigma. They want to become green belt. They want to become black belt. And so you want to entice them. It's more based on a pull model and not a push model. We don't, when I was at Northrop Grumman, we don't push down. People saw the benefit of it, then they start pulling. They want to come. This is one of the last few slides here, but you can see the kind of concept that people learn. Organizational alignment, they understand what the cost of poor quality means, right? If you have internal failure, that's a big cost. You have external failure, even bigger cost. And if you're not being efficient, and you actually have a cost of fixing things, there's a lot of problem with that, right? So they understand that, so they start thinking about minimizing and then focus on those things. Kano model is another thing that we teach. The team effectiveness based on goal, role, process, interaction model. There's a very simple model. I think you can Google that and you find what it is. And that's something that I continue to ask the team to go back and review with the team to make sure that they understand that clearly, because that's part of the alignment. Lean concepts, and the other tools that are being used, like process mapping. We teach them very few tools. We don't focus much on tools, but some very powerful tools that they can just participate as part of the team, but they don't need to know a lot, okay? And then here are some lessons learned here. You gotta make sure you have a way to kind of reinforce the concept. The coach, the mentor, your staff, focusing, if you want people to change behavior, don't just focus on the what, focus on the why. Why and how are they doing things? Because there are different ways. There are more efficient ways of doing things. There are inefficient ways of not doing doing things. So focus on the why and the what, but also the how. Provide regular feedback, and target. For this kind of training, target 100%. You want everybody to be aligned. They need to understand the lingo. You need to understand what alignment means before you even talking about, Lean and Six Sigma concept. Encourage them to apply every day, and expand the reach of something that are more strategic. I'm not saying to not focus on process improvement here. I'm talking about doing both strategic project as well as, getting people to actually change shifting behaviors by going through this kind of training, so that they can be more effective in their everyday work activities. Promote and engage at all levels of organization. Have some kind of community of practice. I mean, PMI right here is a community of practice for you guys. So you are doing that right now. Engage, managers and directors, get their support as needed, and certainly empower the frontline staff. Right, those are the key lessons, so I think it's important to understand, the challenges that organizations have gone through in terms of wanting to really to change the culture. Hopefully what you get out of this presentation here is that you should be thinking about a model where you can engage 100% your population, right? And basically concepts that were learned, so you can actually tap expertise on Agile, Lean, and Six Sigma, and get them to help you kind of unbundle some of these concepts and techniques there, and have a curriculum, as I have kind of lay out here, when you really focus on about alignment and teamwork up front, and then begin to kind of peel the onions and go to some of the more basic Lean Six Sigma concept, to make sure that people understand about, how to define the problem, how to use data to help validate the problem, understand Lean, right? Some of those ways that are commonly being introduced into the organization that could be prevented, and be able to kind of step two, and reinforce it on an everyday basis so that you can actually help eventually shift the mindset. Remember thinking about relate, repeat, and reframe. Question that, right? Rather than just use facts, fear, or force, but get people to kind of relate, and until you actually can get people to see things differently, it's really hard to really change people's behavior. So in the end here, I think one of the key point you want to take away here is that common sense is not always common practice, right? In fact, Stephen Covey did say that common sense is the least common of the senses. And in fact, common sense is not always common practice. So you want to make it a common practice and continue to improve on that. So I end here, Roberto, and see if
fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Le. I think we got that was a fantastic presentation. I hope that we're able to extract some of the experience and knowledge. We have about 7 minutes now, and I think maybe if you can spend a couple of minutes. I know you've talked about it when you've mentioned some of the, creating a pull system to bring the organization on board rather than pushing it in, and trying to get the engagement and the support from the management. But if you have some practical tips on how do we influence our management to bring them on board into implementing, for example, the philosophies of Lean Six Sigma, maybe just some practical tips.
So, when I was with Northrop Grumman, it's a very large enterprise. And if I introduce something like this, they're going to laugh at me because, back then, you got 3 days, 5 days for training, green belt, black belt. And then, they've got, process improvement teams going on, and now they move into agile, right? So what I've done is really, I took this in a smaller scale. So if I were part of the organization, if I were to do internally, I would try to find some collaborator, someone who's who I see as a change agent within the organization. Maybe I can actually pilot it. It may be small at first, and at first when I launch into this, it's very small. But then after people hear about it, they start to ask, well, how can I get involved? And so start small, get some buy-in from some key collaborators, some key influencer within the organization, and it's not, you can see that it's a lot easier to sell this because it doesn't take much time, right? So 1 hour a week, that's not much to ask. I mean, I do it at lunchtime. I find a way to actually make it easier for people. And in fact, even before this pandemic, we actually launched into remote training. When at that point in time, people were doing all they do in-person training. We launched into remote training because we have no budget, right? So think of it like I'm going to I'm like a low budget movie maker. So I don't have a lot of resource. I find the cheapest way, and I find a way to actually, I want to make, once I find a collaborator, I find the right way to kind of deliver the training, then I want to make the training interesting. So I'll be glad to share with you a lot of the video clip. Every time we teach a module, I send them a video clip. It's funny, but it makes the point. And you want people to have fun with it. And once they have fun with it, they start to like it. And use that video clip to kind of demonstrate the concept, and then you talk to it. And every time you teach it, you talk about it, and then next time you go and you reinforce some of those concepts. That's how you start. Start small. Eventually, you get the pull from the organization. Someone that high up is going to hear. You start to grow that and expand it.
Okay, fantastic. Starting small. That's a very good advice. The next question was, there is a customary practice that, and I know you've mentioned during the presentation a couple of books, but if you could leave with the audience a couple of recommendations of books. I know you mentioned Stephen Covey and another books. What would be your recommendation for a book to learn more about these principles and then implement them?
So a couple books that I quoted, like, I think Change or Die, Change Management, I think it's very good one. Alan Deutschman. DEUTSHMAN, something like that. You said the title is Change or Die. So that's one to look at. Oh, and I forgot. I should share with you that my book is going to come out. Roberto, I'm right behind you. I'm going to deliver. It's the fall of this year with my colleagues, Grace Duffy, but it's called Human Centered Lean Six Sigma: Creating a Culture of Integrated Operational Excellence. So this will be an interesting one because it talks to the details of each of the modules, the segment, the roadmap that I'm kind of lay out here. But there are other interesting books that I would say from besides Lean Six Sigma. I think there are a lot of books on that already. What I find, what I think the teams could do is look at Change or Die is one. The other one is on, there are some things on Agile. I don't remember the title, but let me take an action and I will find the title that I send that to you. And then I will make this presentation. I want to send it to the PMI so that you can actually distribute that however you choose to. That certainly is available. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think then from now to the fall of 2023, we're going to read Change or Die and then the 7 Habits of Stephen Covey. And then we'll read Dr. Leah's book when it comes out. Huh? That will be our release. So Elena, if you want to say about words, but we have 1 minute, but I just wanted to say thank you, Elena, for the organization, and thank you for Dr. Lee and the presentation.
Yeah, and Dr. Lee, as Roberto said, it's a huge honor for us to have you here today, and thank you for sharing your time, your knowledge, for enjoying Seville, and thank you, Roberto, for leading this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.